The chin strap hung loose beneath his jaw. It was such a small thing, a detail most people would never notice. But to those who understood the silent language of the guards outside Buckingham Palace, it spoke volumes. Guard Thomas Hartley stood motionless in the crisp morning air, his red tunic pressed to perfection, his bearskin hat towering above him. Everything about his appearance screamed discipline and tradition. Everything except that chin strap, dangling an inch too low. It was October 17th, and London was waking up slowly. Tourists hadn't yet gathered in their usual crowds. The morning mist still clung to the palace gates. Thomas had been standing at his post for 40 minutes, his face an unreadable mask, his eyes fixed on some distant point only he could see, inside his chest. His heart was breaking, but the world didn't need to know that. The world expected him to be a statue, a symbol, a piece of living history, so that's what he gave them. Almost the chin strap was his rebellion, his whisper of grief in a role that demanded silence. If you're drawn to stories of quiet strength and hidden emotion, stay with us. You won't want to miss what happens next. And if you love real human stories that remind us what courage truly looks like, consider subscribing. These are the moments that deserve to be remembered. Across the plaza, near the Victoria Memorial, a man in a dark jacket watched Thomas with unusual intensity. His name was Vincent Marlowe, and he had no business being in London. In fact, 3 countries had warrants out for his arrest. Armed robbery in France, assault in Belgium. And in England, something far worse, a crime that had made headlines 6 months earlier, and then vanished into the bureaucratic maze of international law enforcement. Vincent had a gun, tucked into his waistband. He'd been carrying it for 2 days. Ever since he'd arrived on a freight ship from Rotterdam, sleeping in cargo containers and stealing food from dock warehouses, he was desperate, cornered, and running on fumes of paranoia and adrenaline. And he had a plan that was either brilliant or insane. He'd been studying the guards for an hour, watching their movements, testing their stillness. He'd seen tourists poke them, shout at them, even try to make them laugh. The guards never broke, never responded. They were famous for it. Vincent needed a hostage. He needed leverage, and he needed someone who wouldn't fight back. A royal guard seemed perfect. He started walking toward Thomas, his hand sliding toward the weapon beneath his jacket. His pulse hammered in his ears. 20 feet away? 15? 10. Thomas's eyes didn't move. His expression didn't change. Vincent stopped directly in front of him, so close he could see the fine stitching on the red tunic. So close he could hear Thomas's breathing, slow, controlled, unnaturally calm. "Listen carefully," Vincent whispered, his voice tight with desperation. "I have a gun. I'm going to pull it out, and you're going to walk with me. Nice and slow. You're not going to signal anyone. You're not going to resist." Thomas said nothing. His face remained stone. Vincent's hand moved to his waistband. The cold metal of the grip met his palm. He began to pull the weapon free, his eyes locked on Thomas's face, waiting for fear, for recognition, for something. What happened next would become the moment that defined both of their lives, and it started with the smallest movement to flicker in Thomas's eyes that Vincent almost missed. The gun cleared Vincent's jacket. Black metal, dull in the morning light. His finger rested near the trigger, not on it, not yet. He was trying to stay controlled, to keep this from spiraling into violence too quickly. "Did you hear me?" Vincent hissed, leaning closer. "I will use this walk. Now." Thomas Hartley's eyes shifted. Not his head. Not his posture. Just his eyes, moving from that distant, fixed point to focus directly on Vincent's face. It was the first time Vincent had looked into them properly. They weren't afraid. They were sad. Deeply, profoundly sad. Like someone who had already lost everything that mattered and had nothing left to fear. And then Thomas spoke. His voice was quiet, barely above a whisper, but it carried a weight that stopped Vincent cold. "My daughter died 3 days ago. She was 7 years old." Vincent's hand trembled. The gun wavered. Thomas continued, his lips barely moving, his face still locked in that disciplined mask. Leukemia. We knew it was coming. Doesn't make it easier. The words hung in the misty air between them. Vincent's breath caught. This wasn't supposed to happen. Guards didn't talk. They didn't confess. They didn't bleed emotion into the space where only silence should exist. The chinstrap, Thomas whispered. It's worn down when a guardsman is in mourning. Most people don't know that. But my brothers in arms do. They see it. They understand. Vincent's mind was racing, but his body had gone still. He'd expected resistance or compliance. Not this. Not humanity in a red coat. Not grief that mirrored his own, because Vincent had a daughter too. Somewhere in France, with a mother who wouldn't let him see her anymore. A little girl who would be 8 next month, who probably didn't remember his face. Who'd been told he was dangerous, and she was right. You're going to shoot me? Thomas asked, his voice still eerily calm. Or take me hostage. Either way, it ends badly for both of us. Armed police will have you surrounded in 90 seconds. They're already watching. Camera on the lamppost behind you? Officers in plain clothes by the memorial. You pulled a weapon on palace grounds. You won't make it to the street. Vincent's eyes darted sideways. He couldn't turn his head without giving himself away, but he could see shadows of movement in his peripheral vision. People who'd been standing too still. People whose positions formed a perimeter. His heart sank. But here's what I think, Thomas continued, his words measured and deliberate. I don't think you want to hurt anyone. I think you're scared. I think you're running. And I think whatever you did, it's eating you alive. Vincent's throat tightened. The gun felt impossibly heavy in his hand. I lost my little girl, Thomas said, and for the first time his voice cracked just barely, just enough to be human. Nothing will bring her back. But I'm still here. Still standing? Still choosing what kind of man I want to be in the time I have left. A tear slid down Vincent's cheek. He didn't bother wiping it away. You can pull that trigger, Thomas whispered. You can try to run. Or you can put the gun down and let me help you do the next right thing. Because I promise you, whatever comes after this moment, it's better than the path you're on now. The plaza seemed to hold its breath. Tourists had been quietly ushered away. Officers waited, fingers near weapons, but not drawn. Everything hung in the balance of Vincent's next decision. His hands shook violently now. The gun's barrel dipped toward the ground. I hurt someone, Vincent choked out. In Manchester, I didn't mean to. It was a robbery. It went wrong. He was just a shopkeeper. He had grandkids. Thomas's jaw tightened, but his eyes stayed soft. Is he alive? Yes, but I ran. I've been running for months. Then you can still make it right. Vincent's knees felt weak. The gun slipped in his sweating palm. If you put that weapon down, Thomas said quietly, I'll stand with you when they come. I'll tell them you surrendered. I'll tell them you chose to stop running. Vincent's chest heaved with silent sobs. The morning sun was breaking through the mist now, casting long shadows across the plaza. Everything felt surreal. Time had stretched and compressed. He couldn't tell if 30 seconds had passed or 30 minutes. Why are you helping me? Vincent managed to whisper, I just threatened to kill you. Thomas's eyes held steady. Because someone showed my daughter kindness in her last days. A nurse named Sarah. She wasn't assigned to our ward. She was on her break. But she sat with Emma for 2 hours, reading her favorite book, doing silly voices, making her laugh when I couldn't. She had no reason to do that. She just chose kindness. 3 hours later, Thomas Hartley sat in a small room inside the palace administrative building. His bearskin hat rested on the table beside him. His red tunic was draped over the back of his chair. He wore just his white undershirt now, his hands wrapped around a cup of tea that had long gone cold. Across from him sat Commander Patricia Wells, head of palace security. She was a woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen everything twice. She'd watched the entire encounter on the security monitors. She'd given the order to hold back, to let it play out. Because she'd recognized something in Thomas's body language control, even in crisis. That was either the bravest thing I've ever seen, she said quietly, or the most foolish. I haven't decided which. Thomas stared into his tea. Maybe both. You broke protocol. You spoke while on duty. You engaged with an armed threat. I did. Could have been killed. I could have. Thomas looked up, meeting her eyes. But I wasn't. And he didn't hurt anyone. And now he's in custody instead of loose in the city with a loaded weapon. Commander Wells leaned back in her chair, studying him. The psychologist wants to evaluate you. Standard procedure after an incident like this, and you're being taken off active duty for the next 2 weeks minimum. Again, standard procedure. Thomas nodded. He'd expected as much. But I want you to know something, she continued, her voice softening. What you did out there. Most people would call it reckless. But I saw a man make a choice to treat another human being with dignity in his darkest moment. And that man chose to surrender because of it. She slid a piece of paper across the table. This came through 20 minutes ago. Vincent Marlowe is cooperating fully. He's given statements about 3 other suspects in his network. He's asking to be allowed to write a letter to the shopkeeper he injured in Manchester. He wants to take responsibility. To face what he's done. Thomas's hand trembled slightly as he picked up the paper. The words blurred as tears gathered in his eyes. You did that, Commander? Wells said. Your words. Your choice. Emma would be proud. The sound of his daughter's name from someone else's lips broke something open inside Thomas. The tears spilled over. He didn't try to stop them. For the first time in 3 days, he'd let himself fully feel the weight of his grief. Commander Wells stood, moving around the table. She placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. Go home, Thomas. Be with your wife. Mourn your little girl. Take all the time you need. The uniform will be here when you're ready to come back. Thomas couldn't speak. He just nodded, pressing the heels of his palms against his eyes. And Thomas? She squeezed his shoulder. The chinstrap. I saw it. We all saw it. None of us said anything because we understood. That's what brothers and sisters in arms do. We carry each other's grief. She left him alone in the room then, closing the door softly behind her. Thomas sat in the silence, surrounded by the faint smell of furniture polish and old books. The palace was a building of history, of tradition, of moments that stretched back centuries. And now his moment was part of that history too. A small moment. A quiet moment. But one that mattered. He thought about Vincent Marlowe, sitting in a cell somewhere across the city. A man who'd made terrible choices and would now face the consequences. But also a man who'd been given a chance to change course, to choose differently. He thought about Emma, her small hand in his, her voice asking about goodness in people. He'd kept his promise to her. Even when it was hard, even when it was risky, he'd chosen to believe in the goodness. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A text from his wife Sarah. Coming home soon? I need you. Thomas stood slowly, gathering his things. His body ached from standing so long. His heart ached from everything else. But there was also something new in his chest, something that felt almost like peace. He texted back, on my way. I love you. As he walked through the palace corridors toward the exit, he passed other guards preparing for their shifts. Several nodded to him. One, a young man named Peter, caught his eye and touched 2 fingers to his chest, right over his heart. A silent gesture of respect, of recognition, of shared understanding. Thomas returned the gesture. Outside, the October air had turned crisp and cool. Leaves skittered across the pavement. London rushed around him, millions of people living their lives, carrying their own griefs, fighting their own battles. His voice grew softer still. Emma asked me, the day before she died, if I thought people were mostly good or mostly bad. She was 7 years old and dying, and she wanted to believe people were good. Vincent closed his eyes. Fresh tears spilled down his face. I told her people were good, Thomas continued. I told her that even when they made mistakes, even when they were scared and did terrible things, most people had goodness buried somewhere inside them, and I promised her I'd keep believing that. Even after she was gone, especially after she was gone. The gun's barrel pointed straight at the ground now. Vincent's finger had moved away from the trigger. I'm keeping that promise, Thomas whispered. Right now. With you. Behind Vincent, footsteps approached. Slow, careful, professional. 2 plainclothes officers. Hands visible, palms open, positioning themselves, but not rushing, giving this moment space to breathe. Giving Vincent a chance to make the right choice. Vincent Marlowe. One of them spoke, voice firm but not aggressive. We know who you are. We know why you're here. But right now, in this moment, you get to choose how this ends. Vincent's whole body shook. The gun was so heavy, his arm ached from holding it. His soul ached from carrying months of guilt and fear. My daughter's name is Marie, he said suddenly, looking at Thomas. She loves butterflies. Her room is covered in them. I used to take her to the park to catch them. We'd let them go. Every single time. She said they needed to be free. Thomas nodded slowly. Then let yourself be free. Put it down. The gun clattered against the pavement. The sound echoed across the plaza, like a gunshot itself. Final, irreversible. The moment between one life and another, Vincent's knees buckled. His hands went up instinctively, and he sank to the ground, his face buried in his palms, shoulders heaving with the kind of sobs that come from somewhere deeper than the lungs. The officers moved in swiftly, but gently. One kicked the gun away while the other helped Vincent to his feet, securing his wrists with handcuffs. But there was something different in the way they handled him. Something almost tender. They'd witnessed what just happened. They'd heard Thomas's words. They'd seen a man choose surrender over violence. Thomas remained at his post, motionless once more. His face returned to that disciplined mask. But his eyes followed Vincent as he was led away. Thank you, Vincent, called over his shoulder, his voice breaking. Tell Emma. Tell her she was right. Tell her people are good. Thomas didn't respond. Couldn't respond. Not while on duty. Not while holding the line between himself and his role. But his eyes, those sad, grieving, impossibly kind eyes, said everything words couldn't. The plaza slowly returned to normal. Tourists were allowed back in. Life resumed its rhythm. A shift commander approached Thomas, speaking in low tones, offering to relieve him early. Thomas shook his head once. He would finish his watch. He would stand his full duty, because that's what Emma would have wanted. To see her father stand tall, to see him keep going, the chinstrap still hung loose beneath his jaw, a symbol of loss, a symbol of love, a symbol of the quiet grief that so many carry while the world demands they remain strong. Thomas took the tube home. He sat in a corner seat, his bag at his feet, watching the city blur past through the dark tunnel windows. Commuters packed in around him, earbuds in, faces buried in phones. Everyone in their own private world. No one knew what he'd done that morning. No one recognized him without the uniform. He was just another tired man heading home on a Thursday afternoon, but he felt different. Lighter somehow, despite the grief. Like he'd released something he'd been carrying without realizing it, at Clapham Common Station. He emerged into fading afternoon light. The walk to his flat was 12 minutes. He'd timed it 1,000 times. Walking home from night shifts, from ceremonies, from long days of standing guard while tourists snapped photos and children stared in wonder, Emma used to wait by the window when she was healthy. She'd watch for him, her small face pressed against the glass, and she'd squeal with delight when she spotted his red coat coming down the street. She'd race to the door before he could. Even get his keys out. The flat was on the second floor of a converted Victorian house. Neat, modest, filled with photographs and memories and toys that no one had the strength to pack away yet. Thomas climbed the stairs slowly. His key turned in the lock. The door opened. Sarah was sitting on the couch, wrapped in Emma's favorite blanket, the one with the butterflies. Her eyes were red from crying. She looked up when he entered, and her face crumpled with fresh tears. I couldn't do it, she whispered. I was supposed to go through her closet today, pack up her clothes for donation. I couldn't. I opened the door and just stood there for 20 minutes and I couldn't do it. Thomas dropped his bag and crossed to her. He sat down and pulled her into his arms, and they held each other the way drowning people hold on to lifeboats. Desperately. Completely. "We don't have to do anything yet," he murmured into her hair. "We have time. There's no rush." "I keep expecting her to come around the corner," Sarah said between sobs. "I keep listening for her footsteps. This morning I made 3 plates for breakfast before I remembered." Thomas's chest tightened. "I know I keep turning to tell her things. Little things. Look at that bird, Emma. Did you see the clouds today? And then I remember she's not there." They stayed like that for a long time, the autumn light fading outside, the flat growing dim around them. Neither of them moved to turn on a lamp. The darkness felt appropriate somehow. Honest. Eventually, Sarah pulled back, wiping her eyes. "How was work? Did you finish your shift?" Thomas hesitated. He hadn't planned to tell her about Vincent Marlowe. Hadn't wanted to add more weight to her already crushing grief. But looking at her face, her brave, beautiful, devastated face, he realized she needed to know. She needed the same thing he'd needed. A reminder that goodness still existed. So he told her. Everything. The loose chinstrap. The gun. Vincent's desperation. The conversation. The choice. The surrender. Sarah listened in silence, her hand finding his and holding tight. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said Emma was right. "People are good." "She was always right," Thomas said, his voice thick. Sarah stood suddenly, moving to Emma's room. Thomas followed, worry flickering through him. But Sarah just stood in the doorway, looking at the small bed with its butterfly sheets, the shelves of books, the art supplies scattered across the little desk. "She would be so proud of you," Sarah said softly. "What you did today. Choosing kindness when you could have chosen anger. Choosing to help when you were hurting so much yourself." Thomas stood beside her, looking at the empty room that still smelled faintly of strawberry shampoo and watercolor paints. "I made her a promise," he said. "The day before she died, she made me promise I'd keep believing people were good, that I wouldn't let her death make me bitter or angry or afraid of the world. And you kept it," Sarah whispered. "On the very first test, you kept your promise to our baby girl." Something broke open in Thomas then. A dam he'd been holding since Emma's last breath. He sank to his knees in the doorway of her room and sobbed deep, wrenching sounds that came from the very core of him. Sarah knelt beside him and they cried together, holding each other on the floor of their daughter's empty room. Minutes passed, maybe hours. Time felt meaningless. Finally, when the tears slowed, when their breathing evened out, Sarah helped Thomas to his feet. They closed Emma's door, gently not locking her away, but giving her space to rest, to be remembered, to be loved. That night, they ordered takeaway. Neither had the energy to cook. They ate quietly at their small kitchen table, the television on low in the background, neither of them really watching it. Sarah's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then looked up at Thomas with wide eyes. "It's Susan, from the hospital. Emma's nurse." She opened the message, reading silently, then turned the phone toward Thomas. The message said, "I heard what happened today at the palace. Someone sent me a news article. Thomas, what you did for that man, that's exactly what Emma was talking about in her last days. She kept saying she wanted people to be kind to each other. Even the scary people. Even the ones who made mistakes. She said everyone deserved a chance to be better. You gave someone that chance today. She's smiling down at you. I know she is." Thomas's vision blurred. He'd forgotten that news crews had been filming the tourist areas that morning. Forgotten that cameras had caught glimpses of the standoff. The story was out there now, spreading through social media, being discussed. Being shared. Sarah reached across the table, taking his hand. "She knew who you were. She knew what you stood for. And she trusted you to carry that forward." "I just miss her so much," Thomas whispered. "Every second of every day." "Me too," Sarah said. "But Thomas, what you did today, that's how we keep her alive. We live the way she wanted us to live. We choose kindness. We choose hope. We choose to believe in goodness, even when the world gives us every reason not to." Thomas nodded, squeezing her hand. "Over the next week, Letters began arriving at their flat. Dozens of them. Then hundreds. People from all over the world who'd heard the story. Some were from other parents who'd lost children. Some were from veterans who understood the weight of duty and grief. Some were from people who'd made terrible mistakes and were trying to find their way back to goodness. One letter came from France. The handwriting was careful, almost childish. It was from Vincent Marlowe's daughter, Marie. Her mother had helped her write it, but the words were hers. "Dear Mr. Guard, my papa says you saved his life. He says you talked to him when he was very scared, and you made him brave enough to stop running. He's in jail now, but he writes me letters and he says he's sorry for what he did and he's trying to be better. He says you told him about your little girl and she sounds like she was very nice. I'm sorry she died. I hope you're okay. My papa says to tell you thank you for giving him a chance. He says tell your little girl thank you too, because she taught you to be kind. Love, Marie, age 8. Thomas read the letter 3 times. Then he folded it carefully and placed it in a box with all the others. These letters would stay with him. Reminders that small choices ripple outward. That moments of compassion echo forward into lives you'll never fully see. 2 weeks later, Thomas returned to duty. He stood at his post outside Buckingham Palace, the morning sun warm on his face. His uniform was immaculate. His bearskin hat sat perfectly atop his head, and his chinstrap was properly secured. Worn the traditional way once more, not because his grief had ended. Grief doesn't end. But because he'd learned to carry it differently. To let it make him softer instead of harder. To let it open his heart instead of closing it. Tourists gathered. Cameras clicked. Children pointed and giggled. The usual circus of fascination and spectacle that surrounded the guards every day. But Thomas stood different now. He wasn't just a symbol anymore. He was a man who'd chosen compassion in his darkest hour. A man who'd kept a promise to his dying daughter. A man who believed, despite everything, that people were good. Across the plaza, another guard stood at attention. Peter, the young man who'd made the heart gesture that day in the corridor. He caught Thomas's eye for just a second, and something passed between them. Understanding, respect, brotherhood. They stood in silence as they were trained to do. But their silence held stories now. Held grief and hope and the quiet determination to keep showing up, keep standing tall, keep believing in something better. At noon, a family approached. A mother, a father, and a little girl about 7 years old, with butterfly clips in her hair. The girl stared up at Thomas in wonder, her eyes wide. "Mummy, why doesn't he move?" she whispered loudly. "He's very disciplined, sweetheart," the mother replied. "He's standing guard, protecting the palace." The little girl considered this seriously. Then she stepped forward, careful not to get too close, and spoke directly to Thomas. "Thank you for protecting everyone," she said solemnly. "You're very brave." Thomas couldn't respond, couldn't move. But his eyes, though sad, kind, impossibly strong eyes softened, just slightly. And if you were paying very close attention, you might have seen the smallest glisten of moisture at their corners. The family moved on. The day continued. Thomas stood his watch, and somewhere, in whatever place exists beyond this one, a little girl with butterfly clips in her hair smiled, because her daddy was keeping his promise. He was choosing kindness. He was believing in goodness. He was being the man she'd always known he was. The Chinstrap incident would be forgotten by most within weeks. The media would move on to newer stories. The viral moment would fade from social feeds. But in a prison cell in London, a man named Vincent Marlowe would remember. He'd carry those words with him through his sentence, through his rehabilitation, through his eventual release years later when he'd reunite with his daughter and work, every day to be the father she deserved. And in flats and houses and apartments across the city, people would carry their griefs a little differently, choose kindness a little more often, believe in goodness a little more stubbornly, because sometimes the smallest gestures, a loosened chinstrap, a whispered conversation, a choice to see humanity instead of threat, create ripples that reach farther than we'll ever know. Thomas Hartley stood his post, silent, strong, grieving, hopeful. A guard who'd worn his chinstrap down and changed a life with his sorrow. A father who'd lost everything and chose to give anyway. A man who'd kept a promise to a 7-year-old girl who believed the world was full of goodness and proved her right.